What is up YouTube? Welcome to another build order guide. This time we are looking at HRE, in particular the Bass Castle into Burgrave Rush. And this particular variation of the build isn't focused on getting up to castle as quickly as possible. This is going to be a more safe variation of the build if your opponent is making early feudal units and they're looking to come pressure you early on. So keep that in mind with this demonstration. And one thing I'll preface it with, and it'll make a bit more sense once you start looking at this guide step by step, is that if you are coming up against an opponent who you have scouted and you know that they're not going to be aggressive, for example, they're going 2TC or whatever it might be, I highly recommend that you just stick with a lower number of gold and consistently gather that so that your food reaches 1200 whilst your gold also hits 600 at the same time. That's just going to mean you can age up around 30 seconds to a minute faster, but this is definitely the safer variation of the build. The Burgrave build is great at kind of punishing your opponent, giving you space to deal damage to someone that's greedy, or completely repelling an age 2 push that your opponent's doing. And then off the back of that, you have the advantage of being up an age a lot quicker, being able to collect relics, stronger units, access to better eco, and then you can kind of control the game from there. Or just end it right then and there. So I find it really good if your opponent overcommits to age 2. Also, with the way that this build is structured, it's going to be safe even if your opponent is going aggressive. Keep in mind, this is probably not good against French just because their Royal Knights are so strong in age 2 and they can actually fight off men-at-arms in smaller numbers. So I probably would advise not doing this against French, but basically any other civ, I have found it to be quite effective. Obviously against certain civs it's going to be more effective than others, but give it a crack, see how it feels, and let's dive into the build, guys. If you are interested in a written version of this build order guide, I will have that in my Discord, which I'll leave a link to in the description of this video, so feel free to check that out. And not only that, we have a bunch more build orders in there waiting for you as soon as you join. Completely free, no paywall or anything like that. So if that interests you, come say hi, get access to the written build orders, and start Burgraving your opponent. Alright guys, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to queue a scout, and we're going to send 3 villagers to gold, 2 onto food, and... sorry, 1 onto food and 2 onto wood. So let's get started. So we're going to go 2 onto wood here, and then we're going to take 3, go onto gold. Now, one thing I like to do with my scout is obviously get the original sheep from the spawn. I can't actually move that sheep, which is annoying. And we're going to go out on the map, obviously get as many sheep as we can. And with our next vills, we're going to come and bring them out onto the sheep that we've moved onto the other side of the TC. Now what we've done with the sheep here is we've moved the sheep across to the side where the gold is, so that we can move our prelate across to this side and move back and forward between the gold and the food. This is basically just going to maximize the gathering buff that the prelate provides. So rather than empowering 2 vills or 3 vills, it's going to empower all 5 or 6. So once these 3 are inspired, we're going to move back to the food. And with our scouts, we're just going to be collecting as many sheep as we can. Now with the new patch, I like to always go double scout, just because you no longer have to create the prelate, so you're not going to be sacrificing 2 vills for a scout. Because prior you had to build the prelate and then also the scout as well. So once the inspiration starts running out here, we're going to send it across to gold. And then once you have, say, around 60 or so wood, I did a little bit later here, you want to build a mill. Because we're going to be opening wheelbarrow. Wheelbarrow does affect the age up slightly, like it's slightly slower, but it's really hard to fit wheelbarrow inside this build at a later stage. So we're doing it earlier rather than later, so we have a nice eco setup. And as soon as we build this mill, we're going to be taking in wheelbarrow as soon as possible. This guy's just going to stay on berries because he's already gone over there. Drop your sheep off at the TC. Send one of the scouts across to your opponent's side. Now, if you're on the ball as well, once you get all the sheep, if you think like majority of the sheep are taken off the map at this stage, I like to send both my scouts across to my opponent, then start harassing his gold mine. So once you have 9 on food here, we're going to start sending across to gold again. So in this build, we're not actually aiming for the quickest age up as possible. Obviously, we've gotten wheelbarrow at the start, which is going to slow us down. But not only that, is what we're going to be doing, we're going to be overgathering gold. Now, the reason we're going to overgather gold here is because there's a good chance that we're going to get pushed off gold. Depending on your opponent's civ, like if it's the English, you're most likely going to be pushed off. If it's the French, you're definitely going to get pushed off. I haven't tried this against French, but my instincts tell me that this build is not going to be good against French. And I'd probably say that's like the only civ where I would say this build is really not going to work. I think against most other civs, it's going to be somewhat viable. And I accidentally put an extra guy on food there. Start sending across to gold, and this one chopper, he's going to be building a house here. And we're going to send 9 vills across to gold here. Now in most spawns, your deer is not going to be this close. So for most maps, with the exception of Altai and Hill and Dale, which I'd say is probably the best 2 maps for this strat, just because... let's just menu drop off. Just because you have deer in the spawn, so food is never going to be an issue. In some games, you might get really unlucky with sheep. And I'll go through what I tend to do if we... So at like this stage, right? Once you get 9 vills on gold, and you didn't get that many sheep, like in this game, it's probably fine to have majority on sheep because we got quite a few. Obviously, we're up against the AI, so their pathing might not be the most ideal pathing for scouts. Sorry, I was a bit distracted, but as soon as you get, like, you age up and you have the excess gold, create another prelate so that you can split them between the food and the gold here. Once you have 9 on gold, you want to start going to food. And for example, if we didn't get this many sheep, start sending more to berries, because if your opponent decides to go aggressive, these berries might not become accessible anymore. So if you consume, say, 500 food or a little bit more from the berries, you'll then have like a few extra sheep to work with once we look to get the fast castle in. So we got 1 prelate on the gold, 1 on the food here. And what we're going to aim for is around 900 gold. Ideally, we go for a little bit more than 900. And as you can see, we're aging very slow, which is totally fine. That is intentional at this stage. So the idea about overgathering gold here is if we do get pressured off it, then we will have enough to pump out. Men-at-Arms also get the upgrades that we need. And once we've kind of repelled the attack from our opponent, we can then move our vills back onto gold once it's safe to do so. So with these gold vills, I'm going to probably put most of them on berries. We'll put some on sheep. Sheep is going to result in a faster age up into castle. So once you have like 900 gold, and say they start pressuring you around 6 minutes, you'll have the gold necessary for the castle age. So just keep scouting your opponents, seeing what they're doing. Your slow age up's not going to affect you at all because you're not going to be producing units anyway. And it's going to be pretty shortly after we get to feudal age that we're going to start aging into castle. So 22 on food, that's probably enough now. So we're going to start sending some more guys to wood. We're going to need wood for certain upgrades in the next stage. Housing, etc, etc. And we're probably going to need woods for maybe like more mills on deer later on. So we're just about to start aging. I'm going to manually drop off here because I believe we'll have enough food here. We do. And we're going to send 9 onto the age up here. It can be anywhere from 8 to 9 depending on your situation. we're going to start getting the upgrades as well. So prioritize marching drills, just so that you can gap close any units that you wouldn't have been able to, like for example archers. And I'm just gonna like play this game as if we got pressured off gold, so I'm not actually gonna go back onto gold. Say we got pressured off berries here as well. We're gonna bring these guys back to sheep. And you should age up. Like there's a few hiccups in this build as I was talking through it, but you should age up at around just after 8 minutes. There is ways to make this faster, but the idea about this build is to be safe rather than sorry, like the overgathering gold. If you scout your opponent and they're not doing anything aggressive, then I recommend not putting 9 on gold. Maybe put like 5 on gold or something like that, and just look at getting it up faster rather than overgathering gold. So start producing men at arms as soon as you age up. Look to have about 6 on wood. That should be enough. And as you can see, the sheep are starting to run out here. But if you can, move back out into berries. But if not, just wait a few seconds more until you have like, I don't know, 4 or 5 men at arms out. And then you can just look at pushing back your opponent. And as soon as you've moved out with, say, however many you need in the game that you got, then look at pulling like 8 vills back onto gold here. And say they've completely retreated at this stage and they're moving back towards their side of the base. What you can look at doing now is going out onto the deers. So moving out into the deers, and say we've repelled our opponent now you can start looking at going getting the relics. And as soon as we get the gold drop off here, we're going to get ranged defense as well, because one thing that you're probably going to be doing is diving the opponent's TC. And I will show a game that I played using this strat. I've used this many times and had some pretty good success with it. Against most civs really, with the exception of French. I haven't had much opportunity to try it out, but I doubt it would work. Just because the French knights can make it tricky for you to push out, even if you do have age 3 men at arms. So if you've pushed them back here, but you're not actually going to beat their army, maybe you've just got some breathing room here, I recommend putting more on gold so that you can get the upgrades required to beat your opponent. Because gold is going to be key. If they're coming back and pushing off gold again, you need to make sure that you have the upgrades, which is going to allow you to fight your opponent. For example, ranged defense, or maybe you need the heavy maces if they have their men at arms of their own, if it's like English or if it's a HRE mirror and they're going age 2 men at arms. Something to keep in mind there. So at this stage, bring back relics. And one thing I like to do is, say you've pushed back their army completely. If you have pushed back their army completely, get your tier 2 range defense. Because now what you're going to be doing is, first thing you're going to be doing is going to their key resource points. So if they're Abbasid or Delhi, they're likely going to be in this berry bush. Push them off that. Send some more to gold. If your opponent does have a sizable army, keep most of your men at arms together. Maybe split off like 1 or 2 to go hit like different resource points. But what you want to be doing before you're diving the TC is getting them off all resource points right out on the extremities of their base. So maybe you can afford the upgrade, maybe not that one. We'll go with the +2 damage, and then we'll get extra damage from our blacksmith here. And continue to pick up relics. Keep pushing your opponent off key resource points. I accidentally tossed a few too many out to gold here. You can look at starting adding in farms now as well. And one reason I like to start adding in farms at this stage is so that you don't run out of food all at once. If you just went out on all the natural resources right now, it's pretty likely you're going to run out of food, and then you're going to go, oh shit, I don't have the wood to drop farms for all these guys. So just keep that in mind. And once you have the 2 range defense here, as you can see, these guys do not take much damage at all under the TC. Like, look at this. A TC with 11 vills in it is doing 5 damage to a men-at-arm under the TC. So if they're stuck in age 2 and they're in the situation that this opponent is right now, they're in big trouble. They're not gathering resources. You're out on the map collecting all the relics, bringing them back. And then from here, you have a few options. So if your push is going really well like this, and you want to basically end the game right there and there, you can do one of two things. One, you could build a ram, what I tend to like doing because it's less risky. Rams are expensive, and if they kill the rams and then you don't have any rams left, the resources might not be well spent. What I like to do is I like to gather the resources for a keep, and I'll just drop a keep like wherever their key resource points are. So if they have gold here, I would put it like here, so it denies the food under the TC, denies these berries, this berries. Or if they have 2 forward woodlines, you can look at putting that on the woodlines as well. If you're up against someone like Delhi, where you feel like you need to be Imperial to win the game, because they got to castle, they push back your initial push of men-at-arms with crossbows or something like that, I would look at still gathering stone, but for a different reason. It's to be more defensive. So I actually had a bit of experience against Delhi in this matchup, and you'll probably see the game later on. I'll post that one. But basically I got a keep, dropped it in my base on my key resource points, and then I built 1 or 2 mangonels, and then I went up to Imperial. Mangonels are going to be really good at dealing with the crossbow without you having to make a huge transition into like horsemen. So they're going to be really good defensively there. And you can just start mixing in spears so that horsemen can't snipe your mangonels. And then just re-macro to age up. So if you need to start investing more in farms, you can, once these guys are done with the stone, they can then go into wood, some of them to be building new farms here, and go from there. But basically, if you don't end the game straight away, 1, look at mixing up your unit comp. 2, if you're doing really well or you feel like you have the numbers advantage, drop a keep in their face, get full map control. You can then start gathering up more resources, and then you can go from there. One thing to keep in mind, guys, is as soon as you start bringing in the relics, you can start taking a lot more guys off gold. Like right now I only have 1 on gold, and that's probably enough depending on what you're doing. Like if you're adding in knights or something like that, you probably need to keep more on. But then once you start getting in excess of gold and you've been getting your blacksmith upgrades, what you can start doing is obviously just start getting all your tier 1 eco tags. And then what I recommend in Castle Age is if you have a lot of gold stacked up, get tier 2 horticulture. I probably wouldn't look at rushing like the wood chopping unless you've got a lot of guys on wood. And I basically never get the tier 2 mining upgrade. I think it's not the best upgrade. It's only worth it if you have a lot of gold on the map and you're mining a lot. Like right now, like once we're done with the stone, we're not actually going to be mining very much. In this particular game, if it was in this situation, I would even be ballsy enough to drop it right on the TC if I was doing this much damage. If not, like I said before, do it on the extremity resources. Try to deny wood, gold, food, whatever it is that you think they need right at that particular point in the game. And constantly, so one thing that people will kind of do, if you're diving in TC, they'll move out onto the extremities, they'll come out to the deers, they'll even go out to this one. So just send like your scouts, if they're still alive, across to those to see where they're gathering. If not, send like 1 men-at-arm over here, 1 over here. If you see they got like 15 vills on this deer hunt, then send a bunch more men-at-arms over. And just the goal is to keep denying resources and then adjusting based on the game that you're in. Hopefully you found this helpful, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.